Happy New Year's, Whiskey Noobs. I believe this episode is actually going to be posted on New Year's Day, if I'm not mistaken. So it seemed like the perfect time to review the Whiskey Noobs Infinity Bottle, which we haven't reviewed in a super long time. Some of you newer folks might not even know about it. So I'll talk about that for a brief moment, and we will do a review of it. And then I also want to talk about how 2022 has gone, different milestones that we've passed, which maybe that's a little bit boring, but then we're going to get into what to expect in 2023, which I think will be pretty exciting, especially for those of you who have been with the show for a long time and who are looking forward to some new developments. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, a little bit about the things that I'm expecting, all the while reviewing the Whiskey Noobs Infinity Bottle. So let's start off by talking about the Whiskey Noobs Infinity Bottle. If you don't know, the Whiskey Noobs Infinity Bottle is an infinity bottle. Maybe I should define that for you guys first. So an infinity bottle is a bottle that was empty, used to have whiskey in it. You rinse it out, take the label off, whatever you want to do, and then you add in different bits of different whiskeys. Now, this is often something that you do with whiskeys that are getting low. That way you don't have to drink all of that whiskey at the bottom of the bottle every time. You can just take those last couple of shots and dump them in an infinity bottle. That's a very common way of doing it. The Whiskey Noobs Infinity Bottle specifically gets one shot of everything that we have on the show added to it just to basically see what happens. It's just an experiment. I've had some people be very frustrated that I add peated scotches to it. Listen, guys, this is an experiment. It's just for fun. It's not that serious. Now, you can use infinity bottles to do actual home blending, trying to blend your own recipes and come up with unique blends that actually taste good. So that's another common way people use infinity bottles, but that is not the way that I am using this infinity bottle. This is just for fun, and I can't stress that enough. So let's talk about what we have added to the Whiskey Noobs Infinity Bottle. So as I mentioned, this has every whiskey that we've had on the show in it, except for the flavored whiskeys, which I will mention when we get to some of those, because I don't want to add flavored whiskeys to this. I want it to just taste like a blend of different types of whiskey, not like the flavorings of flavored whiskeys. So let's talk about what we added to this in 2022. Coming out of the gates, we added Balcones Texas Single Malt. That was the first whiskey that I had coming out of Dry January, which we actually aren't going to do this year. I'll talk about why we're not going to do it here later on. But at any rate, first whiskey we had, Balcones Texas Single Malt. Then we had Chivas Regal versus Johnny Walker Black. Those both got added into the Infinity Bottle. We had Bushmills Black Bush. We had Aberlour 12 Year, which is a single malt scotch. We had Middle West Spirits Wheat Whiskey, which is actually a whiskey made with wheat as the main ingredient, if you didn't catch that from the name of it. Larceny Small Batch, which was the winner of the Budget Bourbon March Madness. Auchentoshan, which is a lowland single malt scotch aged in American oak. We had Angel's Envy. We had Weller Special Reserve, which is a wheated bourbon. We had Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, Ardbeg 10 Year, Bunnahabhain 12 Year, TX Blended Whiskey, Tenjaku Japanese Whiskey, which you might remember I was not too big of a fan of, Wyoming Whiskey, Wild Turkey Rare Breed, which you might know I am a fan of, Legent Finished Bourbon, similar to Angel's Envy. This is a finished bourbon, not necessarily similar in flavor palette, but I really enjoyed it, but I want to be specific. It's a finished bourbon. That's a callback to that episode for those of you who listened. Then we skipped Jim Beam Kentucky Fire. That one got skipped in the Infinity Bottle. We did it on the show, but I didn't put it in the Infinity Bottle because I didn't want the entire Infinity Bottle to taste like cinnamon. Then the next episode, the next review, actually, we had Woodford Double Oaked, and then we had Glenlivet Caribbean Reserve, and finally Penelope Barrel Proof. So all of those are in this Infinity Bottle, which is getting rather full. It's actually pretty full, so I might share some of it with Bryce and Zach because they might be coming over here soon. So for those of you who know them from the show, I might share a little bit with them as well. But if you want to hear a review of any of those whiskeys that I just mentioned, just bear in mind, there's a full episode of Whiskey Noobs dedicated to those whiskeys that I just read out loud. So go back, listen to that episode if you want, if you haven't been listening from the beginning, and you can get a full review of each of those whiskeys. So I'm going to pour myself a glass, we'll do a quick tasting, and we will talk about what has happened in 2022, things you might not have known about the 2022 year, and we'll talk about what we have planned for 2023. Something I failed to mention, you may have actually seen the Whiskey Noobs Infinity Bottle in some of my newer videos. I am now using it as a mic stand for my little lapel mic that I use for videos. I don't use my podcast equipment for online videos because I record those from an iPhone. But yeah, so fun fact for you there. You can see the Infinity Bottle featured in some of my videos nowadays. So on the nose, this just has this weird blend of maltiness and bourboniness. I think the two things that are standing out the most for me at the moment are the maltiness of the past couple scotches we've thrown in there. Probably that Caribbean Reserve and maybe even a little bit of that Tenjaku, the Japanese whiskey. And then I'm also getting this oakiness, probably from the Woodford Double Oaked. So it's kind of funny because you don't normally get those two things super forward in a whiskey. The whiskey that I think this reminds me the most of is probably the Auchentoshan because that's aged in American oak. So it's a Scotch aged in American oak. It kind of has similar characteristics. Let's give it a try. I'll be totally real with you guys. At first sip, we've got a little bit of peatiness, a little bit of maltiness, this weird kind of oaky flavor. I think I may have successfully made Johnny Walker Whiskey Noobs label. I don't know what label. It tastes kind of like a Johnny Walker, but not like any specific Johnny Walker that I've had. But it's got that little bit of peatiness, that maltiness. It's this weird blend, and then on top of that, it's got this slightly bourbony taste. So it's this funny Johnny Walker-ish tasting drink. And I feel like we have way more bourbons on here than we have scotches, yet somehow the scotch comes through in these. I don't know what that's about. I think the maltiness just overtakes it. Definitely a little bit of that peaty maltiness from like the Ardbeg. I think I even get a little bit of the brininess from the Ardbeg. I mean, that just comes through so strong. So it's a pretty interesting blend. It's not meant to taste good, but it kind of does. So I'm excited to continue to try this over the course of this episode. I'll give you guys another update here in a little bit. Now let's talk about 2022. This was our first full year of Whiskey Noobs. So Whiskey Noobs was launched in 2021, almost midway through the year at the end of April, early May. And so we got about a half a year in 2021, but 2022 was our first full year. We hit a lot of milestones that I want to talk about. Of course, we hit our 1 year mark, which is super exciting. And we also started up some new things that are newer to the show, and I'm excited to talk about. So let's get into that. One of the first big changes that we saw in 2022, I've always had my friends on the show. I've always had newbies on the show to try to make it approachable, to try to show you that there are plenty of big macho tough guys. I don't know if I'd call my friends big macho tough guys, but there are real people out there who don't like the taste of whiskey and have to learn. And I wanted to use that to show you guys that we could introduce noobs to whiskey in a way that's approachable, that's easy, and that helps you to acquire the taste for it, which I think we successfully did in 2021. But in 2022, we saw a change. I started doing virtual interviews. This was the first time, this year is the first time that we started doing that. And I would say it was a success. I've really enjoyed the virtual interviews. Let's talk about who we had on the show. So first up, I had a couple of podcasts reach out to me. You might recall the Whiskey Chasers and you might recall Armchair Whiskey. I talked to both of those guys. They all had great takes on their bourbon journey, their whiskey journey in general, and I found that to be really exciting. That's what got me into these virtual interviews. So that was me getting my feet wet. I was approached by those guys, so it was very helpful that it was a way to kind of push me into the virtual interviews. Then I thought, let's take it upon myself to start up these virtual interviews. And I had Chris from Bourbon of the Week on the show. You might recall that episode was about the best old fashioned, or if you're somebody in my comments screaming at me, it's the best twist on an old fashioned, because it's not technically an old fashioned based on the original old fashioned recipe. But we did the best take on an old fashioned, which came from Chris from Bourbon of the Week's series he did where he was trying to find the best old fashioned on TikTok. So that episode is great. That is still my favorite old-fashioned recipe as of right now. I still make it. I quite literally made one last night. So I really enjoy that recipe. Go check it out if you haven't already. It's very sweet, really good for the holidays, actually. Then I had Chris Fredrickson from Traverse City Whiskey Company talk about how the company got their start, what it was like starting a sourced whiskey brand, the hurdles they had to overcome, and what made them different. That was a really fun interview. I personally really enjoyed hearing about how they started the company and what it's like for normal people with normal jobs to say, we're going to go all in and we're going to try to start a whiskey company. I thought that was super awesome. So I really enjoyed that interview with him, and they had some great rye whiskey. All their whiskeys were good, but their barrel proof rye really stood out to me. So if you haven't had that from Traverse City Whiskey Company, I recommend you give it a try if you want to try some ryes. Then, lastly, we had Daryl McNally, and he taught us about his brand, Limavady, what makes it special, and taught us a little bit more about Irish whiskey in general. That was a ton of fun. Daryl was so knowledgeable on all the topics, which made it really enjoyable. We talked about single barrel whiskeys and why that's so cool, and how Limavady is the first single barrel Irish whiskey. They're doing a lot of really cool things over there. They actually were 8th, I believe. I think it was 8th in Whiskey Advocate's top 20 most exciting whiskeys of 2022. So congratulations to Daryl for that, because you guys deserve it. You got some exciting things going on over there at Limavady. Those were all the guests that we had on. Those were all the guests that I had invited for interviews, I should say. And I had a blast with it. We will be seeing more of that going into 2023, which I will talk about here in a little bit. But it was a good time. I hope you guys are liking the interviews. I appreciate the feedback you guys have been giving me. So I want to keep it rolling with those interviews, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a really nice way for you guys to learn more about the industry from people within the industry. Thus far, we were kind of looking from the outside in, and now we've got folks that are actually in distilling in the industry teaching us about what they do specifically. I find it to be really enjoyable. Hopefully you guys do too. Now, moving on from that, we had merch sales this year. I launched merch twice, actually. I launched some new merch in the later end of the year, which was pretty cool. Actually, I launched my favorite merch in the later end of the year, except for probably the Whiskey Noobs Glencairns. I love those. Those are solid no matter what. So thank you to everybody who bought merch. We are sold out of Glencairns again, so I am going to be restocking those probably while I'm off work for Christmas. So hopefully keep an eye out for those to be restocked. And I can't thank you guys enough. Seriously, the merch sales are awesome. They are the best way to financially support the show as of right now. And I'm so grateful that you guys are willing to actually do that and to financially support the show. It really just shows that we've got a group of people here who like this type of content, who like the way I'm doing it, that I'm trying to be less intimidating. I'm trying to make this a hobby that's accessible for everybody. And I just appreciate all of the love and support that I've gotten from you guys for that. So I could go on and on about that for days, but let's talk about other things that happened. I renovated the entire Whiskey Noob studio, which if you follow me on Instagram or TikTok, you probably saw. I haven't done a before and after yet. I'm actually probably going to do that. I might record that like literally after this episode, but I recorded the before. I need to record the after. But I renovated the whole studio. It flows a lot better for podcasts. Eventually, if we do get to video podcasts, which I will talk about down below, like you guys are looking at my notes right now, I will talk about it later in this episode. If we get to the video podcast, this setup is meant to serve that. It's meant to be a much better camera view of the studio. So I'm pretty excited about that, and I'm looking forward to working on that and seeing how this new studio can really help with the videos and with the podcast. It definitely flows better, and the audio so far has been pretty great. Hopefully you guys are hearing that on your end, but to me, if I hear anything in the background, the audio is trash while I'm editing it. So that is some of the more exciting stuff that's happened, but let's talk about the really juicy stuff, and that's the new records that we hit in 2022. This is all because of you guys. I cannot say it enough. This is all because of you guys listening to the show, liking the stuff, reviewing the show, sharing videos on Instagram and on TikTok, liking the videos, commenting on the videos. Everything that you guys have been doing to support the show has created these records. And some of them I don't think many of you might know about, especially if you're not, stalking my Instagram page every day. You might not know about these. So I wanted to share them with you because they're pretty exciting. First up, we got over 68,000 on TikTok, 68,000 followers. So that is huge. We had a couple of the biggest videos that I've had thus far all happened in 2022. TikTok was originally the best way for me to get people over to the podcast, to advertise the podcast, and you guys absolutely blew it up, and I'm so grateful for that. Now, TikTok doesn't seem to like me as much anymore. The algorithm has been less nice to me. I think it's being less nice to most alcohol influencers. There was rumors going around that the algorithm was going to just quit pushing out content if it's about alcohol. We'll see if they update it or not. And I'm still having some videos do pretty well, so I'm not trying to complain. But the reason I say that is because I'm actually okay with the algorithm not being super nice to me over there, because Instagram has been awesome and you guys have been making it awesome. And we are over 80,000 followers on Instagram. I just want to take a minute to say that. By the time this airs, it's probably going to be a little bit more because it's still climbing. I'll knock on wood. Hopefully I'm not jinxing myself. But even if it stops here at 80K, it's insane, guys, and I'm so grateful for the amount of support you guys have been showing to the Instagram. I feel like Instagram is also better for collaboration, better for interaction with you guys. Instagram is just a much more fully put together platform. TikTok typically pushes me out to strangers. Instagram pushes me out to you guys, so I'm able to see you guys. You can see me more, and we can talk about things more. I am so grateful for that. We are, with the amount of followers we've got now, we're beyond being able to answer every question in the Q&A episode. We're beyond being able to answer every DM. Unfortunately, those are downsides. But the upside is that is because of what you guys have done. And of course, I still try to reach out to talk to everybody who reaches out to me. I still make an effort. I might not get to your DM until weeks later, but every once in a while I sit down and crank out as many as I can. So I'm so grateful for you guys there. We also do have Whiskey Noobs on YouTube now, which was previously pretty lame. The YouTube just existed as like a landing page, but nowadays every podcast gets posted to there with the audio, and I also post shorts on YouTube. TikTok's reels, shorts, they're all the same thing. You know what I mean. I now post shorts on YouTube as well, so I'm working on building up the YouTube platform. If you don't already, go over there, subscribe, like some of the videos, and we will see how that does moving forward. Now, the last one, and this is one that many of you might not know about, and I just can't explain to you the gratitude that I have for you guys for this being the case, is we hit multiple new records in the charts for Apple Podcasts, the charts for iTunes this year. I'm so grateful for it, from you guys for liking the show and reviewing the show. Your reviews and ratings on Apple Podcasts make a huge difference. So what am I talking about? Well, early in the year, we peaked at 9th in the United States for hobby podcasts. I didn't think we were ever going to get back there. It was awesome. And then we continued to stay between top 200, top 100, every once in a while top 50 for most of the year. I mean, we stayed on the Apple Podcast charts for the majority of the year, and I'm so grateful for that. But you guys have been especially awesome in the month of December, because we hit 5th on the Apple Podcasts hobby charts this month, and I thought there's no way that it could ever even get better, until yesterday when I looked and we hit 3rd in the United States of America for hobby podcasts. And of course, we have been on charts for other countries as well. I don't want to take away from those other countries that have been supporting. You guys are the bomb.com as well, because we've been on the charts in many different countries. Off the top of my head, I know the UK, I know Australia, I think Norway for a while. So you guys are the best. We have a worldwide reach, and it's all because you guys are some of the most awesome supporters ever for the ratings. I've seen you guys been posting the ratings, the reviews, and telling your friends, sharing it with others. Can't thank you enough. I could gush all day. That's exciting stuff, but it's not as exciting for you guys probably as hearing what is coming up. So I'm going to talk about that next, after I taste this blended whiskey that we have made in our infinity bottle one more time. It's weird, the specific notes that end up coming through, because it's not just like a perfect blend of all of these whiskeys like you would think it would be. It's like different whiskeys have different things come through. Definite brininess from like the Ardbeg. I got that weird brininess. Of course, a little bit of peatiness. The peatiness is pretty well covered up. Like I said, it reminds me like a Johnny Walker type thing. But the one that I just got on that sip was the peachiness of the Bushmills Black Bush, which I did not anticipate. But I got a little bit of peachiness from that, which, if you remember, that one has a very strong peach flavor to it. So random notes coming through, a little bit of the oakiness of the Woodford double oaked for sure, and then just a little bit of that barrel spiciness that you get in a lot of bourbons. I'm not going to lie to you guys, this is just a funsies experiment. It's not even meant to taste good, and this is a pretty enjoyable whiskey. The only thing that it doesn't have is smoothness. It's definitely got some alcohol burn to it, but what are you going to do? I mean, we're just throwing every single whiskey into here that we have on the show. So pretty interesting. I'm intrigued. I'm probably going to have another glass. Super cool, honestly. So for those of you who, I don't know if anybody has been making their own infinity bottle at home as they follow the show. If you have, I super appreciate your dedication. I'm interested to see if you agree with me on how unique it is. Now let's talk about the moment you guys have been waiting for, looking forward into 2023, what we've got coming up. There are quite a few things that I want to do, and there are only a few things that I can talk about at this point in time because I don't want to get your guys' hopes up for certain things that may or may not happen. But there are certain things that I know for sure are going to happen, and I want to talk about them. First and foremost, we've got more merch that should be coming very soon that is not just about the podcast. So up to this point, it has been Whiskey Noobs hats, Whiskey Noobs logos, shirts that say Whiskey Noobs, those sorts of things. Because I know if I wanted to listen to the show and I wear the hats constantly. I don't wear a lot of graphic tees, but I know if I listened to this show and I did, I'd probably want some Whiskey Noobs graphic tees. So those sorts of things have been all of the merch so far, and I super appreciate how much you guys have spent on it and bought them and supported the show that way. But moving forward, I'm also going to come out with some merch that doesn't specifically have to do with the show. That way, if you're the type of person who you want to support the show, but you don't want to wear a Whiskey Noobs logo, I get it. There are a lot of people there that way. And I'm going to work on coming out with some stuff that you can wear, whether you like Whiskey Noobs or not, or whether you want to show Whiskey Noobs on your person or not. So keep an eye out for that. Basically, what I mean is shirts with slogans on them, shirts that say fun things, shirts that are just, if you like whiskey, you're going to want to wear. I'm working on a few different ideas, and I am working on the designs for them right now, which I do by myself. I don't hire people to do this stuff, so it takes time. Please have patience, and I'm looking forward to releasing that stuff. I think it will definitely spice up the merch a little bit. So then you can have a little bit of both. If you want to support the show and show your support for Whiskey Noobs, you can wear it on your head or wear it on your body. If you want to just have something that a general whiskey lover would like, you can just wear that as well. Either way, I can't express my gratitude enough for you guys who buy the merch. That's a super huge help. And speaking of that, depending on finances, depending on how the finances go moving into 2023, I'm hopeful that we're going to have more reviews of listener requests. We're going to have more reviews of the stuff that maybe I can't afford at the moment, or if I can afford it, I can only afford to buy it and not buy another whiskey within that month. You know, I usually do 2 to 3 whiskeys per month, and it's not cheap, especially if I want to buy my own stuff that I want to try. So as the finances continue to develop, hopefully I can start doing more listener reviews, which I see happening, and I think that's going to be a big step for us in 2023, putting together almost like a fund, like a piggy bank for Whiskey Noobs whiskey requests, especially if it's requested by more than one person. So looking forward to doing that, and I think that's going to be a pretty big change for us moving into 2023. And perhaps, speaking of that, there will be more ways to monetarily support the show, or there will be other forms of monetization. We will see. I don't want you guys to think I'm just going to go full commercial and forget about the quality of the content. That's not the plan. The plan is to work on finances so that I can provide more quality content, because I can't stress this enough. This stuff is not free. Just because you get to listen to it for free doesn't mean it gets produced for free. I've got some older equipment that is ready to go out to pasture any day now, and I don't want to risk that equipment dying, and it also will just streamline things a little bit better. So the moral of the story is this isn't free to do, and it's also, you know, something that I put an exuberant, I don't know if that's even a word, a huge amount of effort into. I want to provide you guys with more quality content. The best way for me to be able to do that is to have some more financial options. Hopefully we'll see some of that in 2022, but let's get to the even more exciting stuff. Just when you thought I couldn't get more exciting, right? What's coming up in did I say 2022 last time? I meant 2023. The more exciting stuff that's coming up in 2023. Of course, more interviews, as I mentioned earlier in the show. I already have a couple of interviews lined up, and I'm working on some interviews that I think will expand the content a little bit, expand the scope. Obviously, we're staying to whiskey. I don't want to make anybody think that we're not going to stick with whiskey. But maybe you want some more conversational type stuff that involves whiskey, those sorts of things. I've got some pretty exciting guests that I am working on. I'm working on reaching out to. I'm working on securing interviews with some pretty exciting people. And I already have some interviews lined up with some very exciting people that I'm excited to have on the show. So more virtual interviews. Virtual interviews make it so easy to talk to literally anybody, and maybe some in-person stuff, but I would like to wait on the in-person stuff for my next bullet point, and that is video podcasts. Ideally, we will get to video podcasts here soon. Currently, I'm going to be fully transparent with the schedule that I have and the budget that I have. It's just not feasible, but I'm working on getting to a point where it is feasible. So there are things going on in the background that will hopefully allow us to get to that point where I can post full video podcasts. I'm working on it. It's certainly a pretty large leap from audio podcasts, but hopefully that's something that we can see in 2023. And when I expand that content to new guests, then it will be more exciting because you can actually see the new guests. So working on that. And lastly, the pretty obvious one that I'm kind of always doing, but I've made some pretty big strides in lately, is changing and improving the video content on social media. I've obviously renovated the studio, working on camera angles, camera quality, microphone quality to bring you guys better content. We've come a long way from me just recording a quick 10-second video on my cell phone and throwing it on TikTok. And I'm working on constantly bringing you guys new content, especially now that we have YouTube. We can do a little bit longer form content on YouTube, not with the shorts, but with actual videos. So we'll see. I'm working on a lot of those things, and it's really exciting, and I just cannot thank you guys enough for your support these past couple of years. So hopefully that's exciting stuff for you guys to hear. I know that when I listen to a lot of podcasts, I'd like to hear updates like that, especially considering where we started. I mean, we started as a audio-only podcast in 2021 where I was just having some of my close friends on, and we had 20 or 30 listeners, and we have come a very long way from there. So thank you guys for that. Thank you for those of you who are on the email list, especially those of you who are rating, reviewing the show, sharing the show, any of those interactions, any of those things that you're doing. They make a huge difference. Now, if you only came here to hear the Infinity Bottle reviewed, I totally understand. I'm going to finish off with that. If I want to sum up this Infinity Bottle in a sentence, honestly, that sentence is, it is awesome flavor with too much burn. I mean, that's just what it is. It burns too much, but it tastes fantastic. It's kind of a weird flavor because I've got these bright, fruity flavors from some of the different whiskeys. I think Wyoming had like a nice custardy flavor to it. Blackbush definitely had that peach that I mentioned. Obviously, the Glenlivet was very tropical, the Caribbean Reserve. So you got those type of flavors, and they're fighting it out with vanilla oak spice from Woodford Double Oaked and the leafy or burning fire peat smokeness of the Ardbeg 10-year. All these weird flavors are just battling it out. And honestly, it's super interesting. I think you almost get a lot of those fruit-forward bright notes in the beginning, and as they fade off, you start to get this like fall flavor. So it's like spring and then fall in your mouth. It's pretty wild. So honestly, I think it's enjoyable. It's pretty funny that it wasn't meant to taste good. It was not meant to be a good tasting blend, and I'm enjoying it genuinely. So if you like the Chivas Regal Johnny Walker type taste, but you also want this weird fruitiness and oakiness added to it, make yourself an Infinity Bottle. Look through the old Whiskey Noobs episodes and add everything except for the flavored whiskeys, and it's going to taste about like that. Super interesting, a fun little experiment to do, especially since we have track of everything that's in the Infinity Bottle. That makes it a lot more fun. So looking forward to see how that evolves in 2023 with the different whiskeys that I have planned and folks that I have planned to come on the show we're going to try their whiskeys as well. So once again, thank you guys for the support throughout this year. I'm looking forward to a new year. I know I've said it before during the little touch point episodes, but we are not slowing down. We are speeding up. Every week, I look back at the week before and think, I'm doing way more podcast work this week than I was last week. Even if it seems like it's slowing down, it's because I'm working on something else in the background that you guys aren't aware of. We're speeding up. We are expanding the content, expanding the platforms that we're on. And I can't thank you guys enough for the fact that that is the case. I'm super excited to see what 2023 holds, and I'm looking forward to bringing you guys even better content and even more interesting content throughout 2023. Thank you guys all for listening. Thank you for your support. I hope you have a happy new year. I know we got to go back to work, but maybe you're back at work already for the new year, and this podcast made your day a little bit better. I hope that's the case. I could ramble all day long about how much I appreciate you guys, so I'm going to stop right here. I will leave you with, as always, as it's been since 2021, learn to drink, drink to learn. Thank you for listening to this episode of Whiskey Noobs. If you like the show, please make sure to leave a 5-star rating or review to help grow the show and get the word out. You can also find more Whiskey Noobs content on Instagram at whiskey_noobs and on TikTok at Whiskey Noobs Podcast. If you want to drink right along with me, make sure to join the email list by sending an email to whiskeynoobspodcast@gmail.com with a subject line saying email list. You will receive monthly emails with a list of the whiskeys that will be featured throughout the month so that you can buy them ahead of time and drink right along with the show. Once again, thanks for listening to this episode. The Whiskey Noobs Podcast does not support underage or otherwise irresponsible consumption of alcohol.